Dad. After living in my house for 8 years, my son-in-law and daughter won a $95 million lottery. That very night, my son-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, "Get out of this house. It's mine now." I just smiled. And then I asked him a single question. A question that made his face go completely pale, like a ghost. "You know how she is, Dad. I was going to make sure he lost everything. Not because I was cruel, but because he was so blinded by greed that he didn't even realize he was standing on the edge of a cliff." Welcome to our story. 8 years later, Connor told me I had to leave. I smiled. He had absolutely no idea about the second ticket. Hello, everyone. My name is Theodore Marsh. I'm 72 years old, and I'm 38 years working as a highway engineer for the Oregon Department of Transportation. I built bridges, not just the kind that cross rivers, though I built plenty of those, but the kind that connect people to their jobs, their families, and their futures. Engineering teaches you to think about foundations. It teaches you to look at what holds up under pressure, what gives way, and how to plan for the long haul. I should have applied those exact same principles to my own life. I know how she is, Dad. I used to live comfortably in a house at 2847 Ponderosa Lane in Bend, Oregon. If you know anything about Central Oregon, you know Bend sits right at the foothills of the Cascade Mountains, surrounded by pine forests. The high desert air is so crisp and clean it almost stings your lungs in a wonderful way. Ponderosa Lane runs along the southern edge of town. It's a quiet street with wide yards where neighbors actually know each other. On nights like those, you can hear the wind whispering through the trees. My late wife, Marianne, and I built that together back in 1988. And I mean, we literally built it. You know how she is, Dad. I framed it, laid the foundation, and poured the concrete myself with the help of a friend in construction. Marianne picked out every tile, every paint color, and every cabinet hinge. She planted the flower beds and a row of young birch trees along the driveway. Over the years, those birches grew tall and straight, their white bark gleaming in the moonlight. Marianne used to say they were the bones of the property, holding up all the beautiful parts. We were married for 41 years. She passed away in the spring of 2016. Pancreatic cancer. It happened so fast, incredibly fast. One day she was complaining about a backache, and just 6 weeks later, she was gone. You know how she is, Dad. I still remember the exact moment the doctor told us there was nothing more they could do. Marianne squeezed my hand and said, "Well, Theodore, I guess we'll just have to make the most of the time we have left." That was just who she was. Steady, practical, and kind. After she passed, the house felt too big, too quiet. I kept her side of the bed made, her slippers resting right by her nightstand. I'd walk past the kitchen, always expecting to smell coffee, only to be met with dead silence. Friends told me it would get easier with time. It didn't. It just felt different. That fall, in 2016, my daughter Claire called. She was 30 at the time, and married to a man named Connor Blake. You know how she is, Dad. They'd been together since college and married for about 2 years. Claire had always been my sweet little girl. She used to sit on my lap and ask 1,000 questions while I drew bridge designs on graph paper. She was bright, curious, and full of life. But somewhere along the way, after she married Connor, she changed. She called less often and visited even less. Even when she did come over, Connor always found an excuse to cut the visit short. That November, Claire told me Connor had lost his sales job. They were struggling to even pay rent in Portland. Her voice sounded exhausted and terrified, so I did what any father would do. I told them to come home, to move in with me until they got back on their feet. Just for a few months. Dad, Claire said, just until Connor finds something new. I believed her. They moved in right before Thanksgiving. At first, it was nice having life in the house again. Claire cooked dinner, and Connor helped me replace some rotting boards on the back porch. After dinner, we'd sit "Oh, how she is, Dad." We'd sit around the kitchen table and talk about nothing in particular. The weather, sports, holiday plans. It felt like a real home. But months turned into a year. Connor didn't find a job. Or, rather, he stopped looking altogether. I couldn't tell. He spent more and more time lying on the couch, scrolling through his phone or behind closed doors, making phone calls. Claire started working double shifts at a local clinic. She'd come home completely drained, too tired to even speak. Slowly, so slowly, I didn't even notice it happening, my house stopped, feeling like my own. Connor started making little comments. "You know how she is, Dad. You really should update this kitchen, Theodore. These cabinets are straight out of the 80s. Or, if we cleared out your workshop, you know how she is, Dad. We could turn it into a real guest room." At first, I thought he was just trying to help. Later, I realized he was measuring, planning, and taking inventory. "You know how she is, Dad." The second year turned into a third, then a fourth, and a fifth. I kept thinking they'd leave once they saved enough money, that they'd move out once Connor found a good job. But it never happened. I became the outsider who felt like a guest. Connor would rearrange the furniture without asking. He'd invite his friends over, leaving me to retreat to my bedroom. Claire started avoiding eye contact with me. Whenever I tried to talk to her alone, Connor would suddenly appear in the doorway, listening in. That was 8 years ago. I should have seen it sooner. I should have recognized how was slowly turning my daughter against me, and how he was taking over a home he didn't build and a life he didn't earn. "You know how she is, Dad." But I didn't, because I loved my daughter, and I kept hoping things would somehow get better. Until 3 months ago. "You know how she is, Dad." When I bought 2 lottery tickets at the Quick Stop off Highway 97. Just 2 Powerball tickets, $2 each. I gave one of them to Claire as a small gesture. I kept the other one for myself. 3 days later, one of those tickets won $95 million. And that was the exact moment Connor decided to throw me out. But Connor made a mistake. When I bought those tickets, I didn't just buy one. Let me tell you how this all started and how I opened my doors to Connor and Claire 8 years ago. But first, I need to go back a little further to the spring of 2016, when I lost Mary Ann. She was 60. Ted. What? He'd laughed about it. We had planned a trip to the coast that summer, a long, slow drive down Highway 10N1, stopping in every little town for clam chowder and watching the waves roll in. He'd laughed about it. Mary Ann loved the ocean. She always said it reminded you that the world was so much bigger than whatever you were worrying about. We never got to take that trip. The cancer moved too fast. "You know how she is, Dad." By the time they found it, there was nothing left to do but make her comfortable. I spent every single day in her hospital room, holding her hand and talking about everything and nothing. She'd tell me stories I'd heard 100 times. About the day we bought the lot on Ponderosa Lane. "You know how she is, Dad?" And the day Claire was born 3 weeks early, and I nearly drove off the road, rushing to the hospital. She smiled. "You know how she is." She smiled. On her last morning, she squeezed my hand tightly and said, "Theodore, don't you dare become one of those old men who stops living. Promise me." I promised. 3 days later, we held her service at the First Community Church. Claire came down from Portland and stood next to me at the graveside, her hand locked in mine. She rested her head on my shoulder and cried quietly. In that moment, I felt like I still had family, like I wasn't completely alone. But then Claire went back to Portland, and I went back to that empty house on Ponderosa Lane, where the silence was deafening. That November, Claire called. I could hear the strain in her voice before she even said the words. "Dad, Connor got laid off. We're behind on rent. I don't know what we're going to do." I didn't hesitate. "Come home, sweetheart. Stay here until you get back on your feet." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." 2 weeks later, they arrived with a rental truck packed with everything they owned. I helped Connor carry boxes into the spare bedroom. Claire hugged me on the front porch and whispered, "Thank you, Dad, just for a little while." I believed her. For the first year or two, it wasn't so bad. Connor would help around the house, fixing a leaky faucet or replacing the weather stripping on the windows. Claire would cook Sunday dinners, roast beef and mashed potatoes, just like Marianne used to make. Afterward, we'd sit around the kitchen table, talking about the weather, Claire's new job at the clinic, and Connor's job hunt. You know how she is, Dad. It felt almost normal, almost like a family. But around the 3rd year, things began to shift. It started with small things. Connor started rearranging the furniture without asking. One day, you know how she is, Dad. I came home from the hardware store to find Marianne's favorite old armchair, the one she sat in every night to read, sitting in the garage. When I asked about it, Connor just shrugged. "It didn't fit the space, Theodore. We needed room for the new TV stand." Then he started moving Marianne's things. Her framed photos on the mantel were taken down, replaced by generic prints from a department store. Her gardening tools in the shed disappeared. When I asked Claire about it, she looked away. Connor thought, "It might be good for you, Dad, you know, to help you move on. Move on." You know how she is, Dad. I didn't say anything. I just put one photo of Marianne back on my nightstand where Connor couldn't touch it. By years 4 and 5, the changes were impossible to ignore. Connor stopped asking my opinion on anything. He'd invite people over, friends of his I'd never met, and I'd retreat to my bedroom. He started referring to your house as our house, as if he'd built it, as if he'd poured the concrete himself. Claire stopped sitting with me after dinner. She would disappear into their room, and I could hear them whispering behind closed doors. I tried talking to her. I caught her in the kitchen one morning and asked, "Sweetheart, is everything okay?" "Hugh, sweet..." She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Everything's fine, Dad." But it wasn't. By years 6, 7, and 8, 2021, 2022, 2023, and into 2024, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Connor would pass me in the hallway without a word. He'd make executive decisions about repairs. You know how she is, landscaping and painting rooms, and I'd only find out after it was already done. You know how she is, Dad. When I protested, he'd sigh, making me feel like I was being difficult. "Theodore, we're just trying to help. You're not getting any younger." You know how she is, Dad. I started spending more time in my bedroom. I ate my dinners alone. You know how stuff, Dad. Hearing their voices and laughter from the living room made the walls of my own house feel like they were closing in on me. My only comfort was my neighbor, Bernard Sullivan. You know how she is, Dad. Bernard was 74, a retired postal worker with a dry sense of humor and a stubborn streak. He'd been my friend for over 30 years, ever since he and his wife, Maureen, You know how she is, Dad. Moved in 3 doors down. Bernard would drop by every week or two, usually with some excuse, borrowing a tool, asking about the weather, or inviting me for coffee. But I knew what he was really doing. He was checking on me. Ha! One Tuesday morning in early April of 2024, I walked over to Bernard's place. He was in his garage, tinkering with an old lawnmower. He looked up and grinned. Well, look at that. Theodore Marsh. Haven't seen you in the daylight for 2 weeks. I was starting to think you'd turned into a vampire. I managed a weak smile. Just been busy. Busy hiding in your room, you mean? I didn't argue. Bernard wiped his hands on a rag and looked at me seriously. You know. You don't have to live like this, right? I know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. We stood there for a minute, neither of us saying anything. Then, Bernard reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 crumpled $1 bills, holding them up. Tell you what, I'm heading down to the Quick Stop to get a Powerball ticket. Come with me, get one for yourself. Maybe you'll win the jackpot and buy your way out of that house once and for all. I actually laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed in weeks. Bernard, I've never bought a lottery ticket in my life. Well, then it's about time. So I went with him. How she is, Dad. On that Tuesday morning, in the first week of April 2024, I did something I'd never done before. I bought a lottery ticket. Not because I thought I'd win, but because Bernard dared me. And because, just for a second, I wanted to believe that something, anything, could change. Those tickets cost me $4, $2 each. The day I bought them was Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024. You know how she is. That afternoon, I went over to Bernard and Maureen's house, just like I did most weeks. Bernard and I had an ongoing chess match, and Maureen would always brew a pot of coffee, sitting with us at the kitchen table to read her book and occasionally throw a sarcastic remark at Bernard's terrible chess strategy. You're getting old and predictable, Theodore, Bernard said, moving his knight. You know how she is, Dad? That's the 3rd time I've seen that opening this month. And yet you still haven't beaten me, I replied. Maureen looked up from her book and smiled. She was 71, sharp how she is, Dad. Sharp as a tack with short silver hair, and had a laugh that could fill the entire room. You two have been playing the exact same game for 30 years, she said. Honestly, you know how she is. I don't know how you keep your sanity. We played in comfortable silence for a while. Then, Bernard leaned back in his chair and said, Did you see the Powerball jackpot is up to 95 million? I didn't look up from the board. I don't play the lottery, Bernard. I know, but maybe you should. Your life could use a little excitement. I moved my bishop. Checkmate in 3. Bernard groaned. Confound it, Theodore. You know how she is, Dad. Maureen closed her book. Bernard, leave him alone. If he doesn't want to throw his money away, let him be. It's just $2, Bernard chimed in. $2 for a little bit of hope. Come on, Theodore, live a little. I'm heading to the Quick Stop after this. Come with me. I double dog dare you. I looked at him. You know how she is, Dad. He had that stubborn glint in his eye, which meant he wasn't going to drop it. And honestly, after 8 years of feeling invisible in my own home, maybe I did need a little excitement, even if it was just a silly ticket. Fine, I said. I'll buy one. Bernard grinned. That's the spirit. An hour later, you know how she is, Dad. We pulled up to the Quick Stop on Highway 97 in Bernard's old pickup. You know how she is. The place was a rundown little gas station with peeling paint and a buzzing neon sign that read, Open 24 hours. The owner, Dave Wilson, was behind the counter. Dave was 55, balding with how she is dad, with a thick mustache, and seemed to wear flannel shirts all year round. He looked up as we walked in, raising an eyebrow. You know how she is, Dad. Bernard Sullivan and Theodore Marsh together in the middle of the afternoon. This can't be good. We're here to make you rich, Dave, Bernard said, slapping two $1 bills on the counter. One Powerball ticket, please. Dave printed the ticket and handed it to Bernard. Then Bernard turned to me. Your turn. I hesitated. It felt ridiculous, a 72-year-old man standing in a gas station, buying his first lottery ticket. But I reached into my pocket anyway, pulled out my wallet, and placed my debit card on the counter. Actually, Dave, make it 2 tickets. Dave blinked. 2? 2. He printed them, ran my card, and handed me the tickets along with the receipt. I folded the receipt carefully and slipped it into my wallet. Then I looked at the 2 tickets in my hand. They were identical, just rows of meaningless numbers. I stuffed them into my pocket and followed Bernard back to the truck. 2 tickets, Bernard said, starting the engine. Look at you, Theodore. High roller. Don't start. When I got home that evening, the house was quiet as usual. Connor was in the living room on his laptop, and Claire, how she is, Dad, was in the kitchen making dinner. You know how she is, Dad. She rarely cooked these days. Most nights she worked late or ate in her room. But tonight, she was standing by the stove, stirring a pot. For a fleeting moment, it reminded me of the old days when Marianne would stand in that exact spot, humming a tune. Hey, Dad, Claire said without looking up. Dinner's almost ready. I pulled the 2 tickets from my pocket and looked at them. Well, how she is. On a sudden whim, I walked over to Claire and held one out. Hey, I bought a couple of lottery tickets today. I know it's silly, but here, you can have one. Claire turned around, looking surprised. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and took the ticket. For the first time in months, she smiled. A real, genuine smile, even if it was small. Thanks, Dad. Who knows? Maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe, I said. Connor appeared in the doorway, crossing his arms. He looked at the ticket in Claire's hand and snorted. Well, look at that. You bought lottery tickets. Seriously, Theodore? Trying to win back your dignity? He walked over, snatched the ticket from Claire's fingers, and held it up to the light as if checking for a counterfeit bill. Powerball. 95 million. Yeah, good luck with that. Claire didn't say anything. She just turned back to the stove. I went back to my bedroom, pulled the other ticket from my pocket, you know how she is, and slid it into my nightstand drawer, right next to Marianne's reading glasses. And then, I forgot all about it. 3 days later, on Saturday, April 6th, I was in my workshop. You know how she is, Dad, sanding down a piece of cedar I was shaping into a small box. Working with my hands kept me grounded. Just as I was focusing on the grain of the wood, I heard a scream from inside the house. It wasn't a scream of terror, but of pure shock and joy. Shock and joy. I dropped my sandpaper and hurried toward the back door. When I walked inside, Claire was standing in the middle of the kitchen, shaking. You know how she is, Dad, holding her phone in one hand and her ticket in the other. We won, she whispered. We won $95 million. Connor materialized behind her in an instant. Snatching the ticket from her hands, know how she is, Dad, he bolted to the laptop on the counter and pulled up the Powerball website. His eyes scanned the numbers once, then twice. Holy cow, he gasped, taking a deep breath. We actually won. I stood in the doorway, watching them. Claire's hands were shaking violently. Connor was already pacing back and forth, phone pressed to his ear, dialing a number. Yeah, I need to speak with someone about claiming a winning ticket, the jackpot, 95 million. Neither of them so much as glanced at me. I stood there, for a long time, feeling a strange weight settle in my chest. It wasn't excitement or joy, just a quiet, hollow ache, because in that moment, I realized something I should have seen years ago. To them, I didn't exist anymore. I was nothing but a ghost in my own home. That evening, I stayed out in my workshop until long after dark. When I finally walked back inside, Connor was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for me. The shift in his posture was immediate. There was no trace of the polite tolerance he'd faked for 8 years. It was replaced by something far harder. He sat with his arms crossed. You know how she is, while Claire stood by the sink, her back turned to me. "What's going on?" I asked. Connor didn't bother standing up. "We need to talk. Our situation has changed." I lingered by the doorway. "Meaning what?" "Claire and I just won $95 million. This house simply doesn't fit our lifestyle anymore." Those words hung in the air. Their lifestyle. "Right," Connor said. "You know how she is, Dad," leaning back and gesturing with his hands. "We think you'd be much more comfortable in an assisted living facility. You know how she is, Dad, somewhere with full-time care and medical professionals on hand. We'll cover all the expenses. All you have to do is transfer the deed of this house to us. Transfer the deed." I looked past him to Claire. "Sweetheart, what is this?" She didn't turn around. She didn't say a word. Connor stood up and walked over to the counter. "Let's be clear, Theodore. We don't need your charity anymore. We don't need you. This house is an antique. Terrible plumbing, outdated wiring. We might sell it, or we might just tear it down. Either way, it's ours now." "This is my home," I said quietly. Connor let out a cold, humorless laugh. "Actually, you might want to reconsider that stance. Because if you make this difficult, we're going to take legal action. Competency hearings, guardianship proceedings. You're 72, Theodore. You live alone, and you can barely take care of yourself. A good lawyer will have no trouble proving you're no longer capable of managing your own affairs." My hands began to tremble. "That is a lie." "Is it? At your age, how many good years do you really think you have left? 5? 10? Do you really want to waste them fighting us in court? Because we will fight, and we will win." I looked at Claire again. "Please look at me." She turned, and for I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Maybe guilt, maybe pain. But Connor placed a firm hand, shoulder on her shoulder, and she looked away once more. "We're offering you a generous deal," Connor said. "A clean exit. You know how she is, Dad. We'll set you up comfortably and pay your bills. All you have to do is cooperate. And if I don't, then we do this the hard way. I've already started documenting things. Your missed utility payments, the times you've seemed confused, your isolation, your depression. A judge will agree that this is a man who needs help, and will be right there, ready to provide it." A tight pressure gripped my chest, making it hard to breathe. Connor adjusted his shirt. "Think it over tonight. We'll talk tomorrow." "Go, Claire." He headed down the hallway. Claire followed behind with her head down, hands clenched tightly. She never looked back. Once they were gone, I stood alone in my kitchen. The kitchen Marianne and I had built with our own hands, feeling entirely like a ghost. I couldn't bear to stay inside. "How she is, Dad?" I slipped out the back door and returned to my workshop. Surrounded by the scent of sawdust and varnish, looking at the tools hanging on the pegboard and the half-finished cedar box on my workbench, I switched on the light. Connor's words weighed on me like lead. "We don't need you." You aren't capable. How many good years do you have left? I sat down on my old stool and buried my face in my hands. I felt small, powerless, and afraid. I stayed there until the night grew completely dark. Eventually, I walked back to the house. Slipping past the kitchen, I walked back to while Connor and Claire's voices drifted from behind their closed bedroom door. I went into my own room and sat on the edge of the bed. Not on my side, but on Mary Ann's. It was an old habit. You know how she is, Dad? Whenever I needed to think through something difficult, I sat on her side, as if she were still there. My eyes drifted to the framed photo on my dresser. It was Mary Ann and me on our wedding day, young and full of hope. That version of myself felt incredibly distant now. Connor was right. I was 72, alone, and held no cards. Then my gaze fell on the nightstand drawer. Hesitating for a moment, I pulled it open. Inside was a small envelope where I kept important keepsakes. Mary Ann's reading glasses, old letters, and some spare cash. Tucked underneath it all, folded in half, was a piece of paper, the lottery ticket. My hands shook as I pulled it out. The numbers were printed clearly. You know how she is, Dad. Grabbing my phone, I searched for the Powerball results and compared them to the ticket in my hand. They matched. Every single number. I sat there. You know how she is, Dad, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then I reached into my jacket and pulled out my wallet. The receipt was still inside, proof that I had purchased both tickets in a single transaction. I had bought them, both of them. Connor had no idea. You know how she is. He assumed the only winning ticket was the one he'd taken from Claire, but he was dead wrong. Sitting back on the edge of Mary Ann's side of the bed, staring at that slip of paper, I felt an emotion I hadn't felt in 8 years of compliance. Anger. And beneath that anger, something far more powerful. Hope. I thought of Mary Ann and how she used to put a hand on my shoulder whenever I overthought a problem. Theodore, she'd say, sometimes you just have to trust the foundation. If it's solid, it'll hold. This was my foundation. This house, this life, the work I had dedicated myself to. I wasn't going to let Connor take it away. I went to how she is, Dad. I went to sleep that night with the ticket tucked safely under my pillow. When morning came on Sunday, April 7th, I picked up the phone and called Bernard. Bernard, I said when he answered. Theodore, what's going on? Theodore, what's going on? His sleep-deprived voice sounded raspy. Is everything okay? I need your help, I said, my voice wavering. Connor is trying to take my house. He's threatening me with competency hearings. But, Bernard, I found something. The other ticket. I bought 2. I have the second winning ticket right here in my hand. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, Bernard spoke. I'm coming over. No, don't. Connor and Claire are still here. Then get over to my place. See you in 5 minutes. He hung up. You know how she is, Dad. I grabbed the ticket, the receipt, my wallet, and my keys. Slipping out the back door, I walked past 3 houses to Bernard's place. He was already waiting for me on the front porch in his bathrobe. You look terrible, he said as I approached. I feel worse. He placed a hand on my shoulder and guided me inside. You know how she is, Dad. Maureen was already in the kitchen brewing coffee. When she saw me, she turned with a look of deep concern. Theodore, dear, what on earth happened? I sat at their Dad. I sat at their kitchen table, the very table where Bernard and I had played chess just 4 days earlier and laid everything out. The winning ticket, Connor's threats. You know how the forced retirement community, the competency warnings, and my discovery of the second ticket. By the time I finished, Maureen's face was flushed with anger. That snake, she breathed. That absolute snake. And Claire just stood there? She didn't say a word? Bernard leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his jaw set tight. You need a lawyer, a good one. I don't know any lawyers. I do, Maureen said. She know how she is, Dad. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through her contacts. Rachel Kemp. She's Bernard's niece's daughter. Do you remember her? She came to our barbecue a few years back, sharp as a whip. Practices property and family law up in Portland. Bernard nodded. Rachel is tough. If anyone can handle this, it's her. Maureen dialed the number. After 4 rings, a woman answered. Aunt Maureen, this is early. Is everything okay? Rachel, dear, I'm so sorry to bother you on a Sunday, but we have an absolute emergency. It's our neighbor, Theodore Marsh. He needs help. Can you see him today? There was a brief pause on the line. Then Rachel spoke. Tell me what's going on. Maureen handed the phone to me. I explained everything all over again, quickly and clearly, just like I used to present bridge blueprints to the State Commission. When I finished, you know how she is, Dad. There was a moment of silence from Rachel. Mr. Marsh, do you have the receipt proving you purchased both tickets in the same transaction? Yes, I do. And the second ticket is still in your possession? It is. Then you have a very strong case. You know how she is, Dad. Can you be in Portland by 11? We can meet at my office. I can be there. She gave me the address and hung up. I handed the phone back to Maureen. She'll see you, Maureen said, squeezing my hand. You're going to be okay. Bernard stood up. I'm coming with you. No, I said. Thank you, but I need to face this on my own. Bernard studied me for a quiet moment, then nodded. All right, but call me the second you're done. Understand? I will. I left their house and walked back to my own. Connor's car was still in the driveway, its windows dark. You know how she is, Dad. I got into my truck, started the engine, and headed west toward Portland. The drive took about 3 hours. I headed south on Highway 97 to Bend. You know how she is, Dad, then took Highway 20 west across the Cascade Range. Dad, it was a route that wound through pine forests and high desert brush, past snow-capped peaks and under wide-open skies. I had driven this road 100 times during my years with the transportation department. I knew every bend, every grade, and every spot where ice would form in the winter. You know how she is, Dad. I thought of Marianne and the day we'd driven this exact road to pick out tiles for the kitchen. You know how she is, Dad. She had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window, while I drove in silence, just watching her breathe. I thought of Claire, little Lise Busberden, little girl who used to sit on my lap, watching me sketch bridge designs. You know how she is, Dad. And her bright laughter when she helped me measure things, holding the end of the tape measure as if it were the most important job in the world. I thought of Connor and the cold, calculating look in his eyes when he confronted me in the kitchen last night, treating me like a nuisance to be dealt with. You know how she is, Dad. And I thought about what I had spent my entire career doing, building things designed to withstand pressure. Bridges, roads, foundations. You know how she is, Dad. Every single structure I had ever built had one thing in common: a solid base. If the foundation is strong, the structure holds. This house was my foundation. This was my life. This house was my foundation. And I was not going to let it crumble. I arrived in Portland just before 11. Rachel's office was located in a brick building downtown near the river. I parked on the street and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Rachel was waiting for me in the lobby. She was 42, tall, with sharp eyes, and her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She shook my hand firmly. Mr. Marsh, please come in. Her office was modest but professional, shelves lined with law books, framed degrees on the wall. She gestured to a chair across from her and sat down with a legal pad in front of her. "Tell me everything," she said. So, I did. I told her about the tickets, the receipt, Connor's threats, the competency warnings, and the retirement community. I showed her the ticket and the receipt. She examined both carefully, took photos, and made notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me. "Here's the situation. He'd Oregon, you know how she is, Dad. Under Oregon law, the purchases a lottery ticket is the legal owner, unless there is a signed agreement transferring ownership. You bought two tickets in the same transaction. You have the receipt. You gave one as a gift to your daughter. There is no contract, bill of sale, or transfer of ownership. You know how she is, Dad. The ticket your son-in-law is trying to claim legally belongs to you." A massive wave of relief washed over me. "So, I have a case. You have an incredibly strong case, but we need to act quickly. We're going to file a notice of dispute with the Oregon Lottery Commission today. Right now, today. If we wait, Connor might try to claim the prize, which would make things much more complicated. We need to get ahead of this. You know how she is, Dad." She opened her laptop and began typing. For the next 2 hours, we drafted the notice, signed affidavits, and compiled our evidence. At 2:47 p.m., Rachel hit the send button on the electronic filing. "It's done," she said. "The commission has been notified. You know how she is, Dad. Connor won't be able to claim a single dime of that prize now without a hearing." I stared at her. "Just like that?" "Just like that. Just like that." She closed her laptop and looked at me. "On a serious note, Mr. Marsh, when they find out about this, they are going to be furious. Are you safe at home? I'll be careful. If anything happens, even the slightest thing, call the police immediately, then call me. Understood?" "Understood." I shook her hand and left. The drive home felt completely different. You know how she is, Dad. The mountains were the same, the road was the same, but I had changed. I no longer felt defeated. I felt armed. I rolled back into Bend just after 7. The sun was setting. You know how she is, Dad, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. As I pulled onto Ponderosa Lane, I saw the lights on in my house. Connor's car was parked in the driveway. I parked, you know how she is, Dad, walked up to the front door and stepped inside. Before I could even close the door behind me, Connor appeared in the hallway, phone in hand, his face bright red. "What on earth did you do?" he roared. I had seen Connor angry before, but this was different. This wasn't the cold, calculated anger of the night before. This was the raw fury of a man who had already started spending money that wasn't his. Connor's voice echoed through the house before I could even shut the door. "Our lawyer just got a notice. Care to explain yourself?" He stood in the hallway, blocking my path, clutching his phone tightly. His face was flushed, his jaw rigid, and I could see the vein in his temple pulsing. "You know how she is, Dad." I placed my keys on the entryway table and looked him dead in the eye. "I don't owe you any explanations." "You filed a dispute claim." Connor's voice rose. "You're trying to steal our money." "I haven't stolen a thing," I said calmly. "I bought both of those tickets. I have the receipt. You gave one to Claire. You can't just take back a gift. I gave Claire a ticket, but it wasn't the winning one." Connor took a step closer, towering over me. "Do you honestly think a judge is going to believe that? Do you think anyone will believe you just happened to keep the winning ticket for yourself?" "You know how she is, Dad." I walked past him and went into the living room. My legs felt steady, and my hands weren't shaking. "You know how she is, Dad." I sat down in Mary Ann's old armchair The one Connor had moved to the garage years ago, which I had quietly brought back inside the previous month. Sitting there now was my way of reclaiming my space. Connor followed me, standing over me with his arms crossed. A classic display of dominance from a man used to getting his way. "You know how she is, Dad. Listen to what's going to happen next, Theodore," he said. "First, you're going to withdraw that claim today. Because if you don't, we are going to make your life an absolute nightmare." I looked up at him. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. We have resources now, real money. We can drag this out in court for years. Lawyers, depositions, appeals. How old are you, Theodore?" 72. "You know how she is, Dad. At your age, do you really think you'll survive to see the end of this?" I didn't answer. Connor leaned down, resting his hands on the armrests of my chair, bringing his face close to mine. "I've been keeping notes, Theodore. About your concerning behavior, your memory lapses, the times you've left the stove on, the bills you've forgotten to pay, the way you wander around talking to yourself." My chest tightened slightly. "I have never left the stove on." Connor smiled coldly. "Are you sure?" "You know how she is, Dad. Because the notes in my hand say otherwise, complete with dates, times, and witnesses. Those are lies." "Is it? Or is that just the failing memory of an old man who can no longer take care of himself?" Connor straightened up and shoved his hands into his pockets. "You know how she is, Dad. We can prove you're incompetent. Theodore, we can get a guardian appointed over you. And once we do, every single decision you've made, including this dispute, will be legally void." I heard a movement near the doorway. Claire was standing there, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her face completely pale. "Connor," she whispered. "Stay out of this," Connor snapped, without even looking at her. Claire flinched, but she didn't leave. She just stood there, her eyes darting back and forth between Connor and me. I stood up slowly. My knees were stiff, but I didn't let it show. I looked Connor dead in the eye. "This conversation is over," I said. Connor's cold smile widened. "You're going to lose everything, Theodore. The money, your daughter, your dignity, all. Love it." I started walking toward the door. As I passed Claire, I paused. She looked at me, and for just a fraction of a second, I saw the little girl who had held my hand at Marianne's funeral. Then I kept walking. "You won't win this. You won't win this," Connor yelled after me. I stopped at the threshold of the hallway and looked back over my shoulder. "My dignity is my own, Connor. You can't take that. You know how she is, Dad." I went into my bedroom and closed the door. For a long time, I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the house. I could hear Connor and Claire arguing in hushed, angry whispers. Then their voices rose. "You know how she is, Dad." Claire was saying something, though I couldn't make out the words. Connor cut her off, his voice sharp and biting, and then I heard her crying. Connor's voice boomed through the walls. "He did this, not us. He's the one tearing this family apart." I closed my eyes. At 9 o'clock that night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel. "Are you okay?" I replied. "Yes, he threatened me." Competency hearings, guardianship, her response came back instantly. Document everything. Write it down. Dates, times, exact words. I pulled an old notebook from my desk drawer, one of the ones I used for project notes years ago, and began to write. Sunday, April 7th, 2024. 7:15 p.m. You know how she is. Connor confronted me in the living room. Claims he has been keeping notes on my concerning behavior. You know how she is. Claims I forgot to turn off the stove. False. Claims I forgot to pay bills. False. Threatened to prove me incompetent. Threatened guardianship. You know how she is, Dad. said they would drag the lawsuit out for years. Claire was present, but said nothing. I wrote for 20 minutes, recording every single thing I could remember. His exact words, his body language, his lies, and his threats. When I finished, I stared at the page as a sudden realization washed over me. Connor hadn't just started keeping these notes after they won the lottery. He had been planning this for a very long time, maybe months, maybe even years. Maybe even years. The notes and witnesses he claimed to have weren't real, but the fact that he had thought of this meant he was always preparing. You know how she is, Dad. He was just waiting for the right moment to seize control. The lottery win had simply accelerated his timeline, Nord asked. I placed the notebook on my nightstand and lay down, but I didn't sleep well. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a threat. When Monday morning, April 8th arrived, I was up at dawn. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open in front of me, waiting. You know how she is, Dad? At 9 a.m., my phone rang. The voice on the other end would change everything. The woman introduced herself as Janet Pierce from Columbia Bank. Mr. Marsh, I'm the assistant branch manager. I'm calling about a power of attorney document we received yesterday afternoon. You know how she is. It has your name on it and designates Connor Blake as your legal representative. I stood up in the kitchen, pressing the phone tightly to my ear. I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. I never signed over a power of attorney. There was a brief pause on the line. That is exactly what we suspected. The signature on the document does not match the signature card we have on file. We rejected the application and flagged your accounts. Mr. Dashin Marsh, someone attempted to forge your signature. My grip on the phone tightened. Who submitted it? The applicant listed on the form is Connor Blake. If this document had been accepted, it would have given him complete legal authority over all your accounts, checking, savings, everything. You know how she is, Dad. He would have been able to transfer funds, close accounts, and even take out loans in your name. I sank into a chair, my chest tightening. Connor wasn't just making threats. He was trying to take everything I had. Every dollar of my pension. You know how she is, Dad. And the savings Marianne and I had built over 40 years. If the bank hadn't caught the forgery, Connor would have wiped me out before I even knew what happened. Mr. Marsh, are you still there? Yes, I managed to say. I'm here. I am emailing you a copy of the document right now, Janet said. You'll want to show this to your attorney. And Mr. Marsh, you should contact the police. This is criminal fraud. I will. Thank you. I hung up and stared at my phone, my hands shaking. Connor had tried to do this on Monday, the very day after I filed the dispute. Know how she is, Dad? Less than 24 hours after confronting me in the living room, he had gone to the bank with a forged document. Was it retaliation? Or had this been his plan all along? You know how she is, Dad? The fear that had weighed on my chest for days began to shift, hardening into a cold, focused anger. At 9:15, I called Rachel. He tried to forge a power of attorney, I said, my voice trembling. The bank caught it. They rejected it, but he tried. Rachel was silent for a second. Then she spoke, her tone deadly serious. That is criminal fraud and forgery. This changes everything, Mr. Marsh. What do I do? Call the bank back. Get a copy of that document and email it to me immediately. Then go to the Bend Police Department today. Do not wait. I'll go right now. This is incredibly useful, Mr. Marsh. I know it doesn't feel good, but this is evidence. This is ironclad proof of how far Connor is willing to go to get what he wants. We can use this. I called the bank back, And Janet confirmed she had sent the email. By 10:30 a.m., it arrived. I opened it on my lapped power of attorney racing. The document was a standard power of attorney form. My name was printed at the top. My name was printed at the top, with Connor Blake listed as the agent. At the bottom, in a stiff, practiced hand, was a signature that looked almost like mine. Almost. But the slant was wrong, and the loops on the M were too wide. Connor had practiced this. I could tell. But he hadn't quite nailed it. I stared at that forged signature for a long time. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was deliberate, cold, and calculated. Connor had sat down somewhere, maybe in my own house, maybe at a local coffee shop, and practiced signing my name until he thought it was good enough. Then he took it to the bank and lied. I forwarded the email to Rachel. "This is our trump card," reply came back within minutes. "See you at the mediation." You. That afternoon, I drove down to the Bend Police Department, a small brick building with a flagpole out front. I walked in and told the officer at the front desk that I needed to report an Morrison to my fraud. They assigned a detective named Morrison Myscoots. He was in his late 50s, with graying hair and a calm, patient demeanor. He listened as I explained the entire situation, the lottery, the dispute, the confrontation, and now the forged power of attorney. I showed him the document from the bank. You know house about it. Morrison took detailed notes, asked a few questions, and examined the paperwork. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Marsh, this is a felony, forgery and attempted fraud. If we can prove Mr. Blake submitted this knowing it was false. He faces serious criminal charges." "I want to press charges," I said. Morrison nodded. "We'll open an investigation. You know how she is, Dad. I'll contact the bank to get their official statements and request any security footage they have. It will take some time, but we'll follow through." He handed me a receipt with a case number printed on it, 2024 BR 04751. "Keep this safe," he said. "And Mr. Marsh, please be careful. If this man is willing to forge legal documents for money, there's no telling what else he might try." I folded the paper and put it in my wallet next to the lottery receipt. "Thank you, Detective." I drove home slowly, the weight of that case number heavy in my pocket. You know how she is, Dad. When I pulled onto Ponderosa Lane, the house looked exactly the same. The birch trees Marianne Tan had planted swayed in the breeze, the porch light was on, How She Is, Dad and Connor's car was in the driveway. But everything had changed. I was no longer just defending myself. I was armed. I had the police on my side. What I hadn't told the detective was that Connor Blake was the one who needed to watch his back now. I had proof of his crimes. Later that evening, around 6:30 p.m., Connor came home carrying a cheap bouquet of grocery store flowers wrapped in cellophane. You know how she is, Dad. I was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee when I heard his car pull in. The front door opened, and Connor appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding the flowers like a peace offering. "Theo," he said, his voice soft and conciliatory, "I think we got off on the wrong foot." I didn't say anything. I just watched him. Connor set the flowers on the counter and pulled out a chair. "Mind if I sit?" I nodded. He sat down opposite me, folding his hands on the table. "I want to apologize. I got overwhelmed. Winning the lottery, the stress, the legals I said. It got to my head. I didn't mean the things I said." I took a sip of my coffee. "Which things? About the house or the competency hearings?" I was angry. I wasn't thinking straight. He leaned forward, his expression seemingly earnest. "Theo, your family. Claire and I don't want to fight you. We want to work this out. I set my mug down slowly. Work it out how? Everything, Connor said, spreading his hands. Look, I know how she is, Dad. Look, I know we've had our differences, but we can fix this. You stay here. This remains your house. We'll set up an account for you. $5,000 every single month. I sat in silence. Withdraw your dispute claim. Looking at him, I cleared my throat. And what do you want in exchange? I asked. In exchange, you simply sign an acknowledgement that the ticket was a gift. Connor said smoothly. You gave it to Claire. We won. In return, we take care of you. $5,000 a month, Theo. That's $60,000 a year. Tax-free. That's more than your pension. You can travel, remodel the house, do whatever you want. He smiled. You know how she is, Dad, and for a second it almost looked genuine. We can be a family again, Connor continued. Sunday, dinners, game nights, just like Marianne used to do. My jaw tightened. Don't, I said quietly. Don't what? Don't mention my wife. Connor blinked, caught off guard. I was just saying. You threatened me, I said, my voice steady. You know how she is, Dad. You tried to forge a power of attorney to steal my life savings, and now you think a cheap bouquet of flowers and a monthly bribe will make it all go away? Connor's smile vanished. For a split second, a cold, calculating look flashed in his eyes. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. Do you really want to fight us on this? He asked, his voice losing all its warmth. You know how she is, Dad. I'm not fighting anyone, I said. I'm protecting what's mine. What's yours? Connor let out a short, bitter laugh. You're 72, Theo. You're living in the past. You know how schlinging to this house because it reminds you of a woman who isn't here anymore. Marianne is gone. She's been gone for 8 years. How she is, Dad, and you're still sitting here pretending she's coming back. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Get out, I said. Connor stood up too. He was taller than me, and he knew it. He looked down at me with pure contempt. You could have had an easy life, he said. $5,000 a month, no worries, no stress. But you'd rather end up broke and alone, clinging to your pride. I'd rather keep my dignity. Connor stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. You're going to lose everything. The money, your daughter, this house, all of it. When that day comes, don't say I did, Dad. Don't say I didn't try to help you. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. You know what your problem is, Theo? You think being stubborn makes you strong. It doesn't. It just makes you pathetic. He walked out, slamming the door behind him. I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. Then I picked up the cheap bouquet of grocery store flowers and threw them in the trash. I sat back down at the table, my hands trembling. Not from fear, but from anger. Connor had tried threats, and they failed. You know how she is, Dad? He had tried manipulation, bribes, and emotional blackmail, and they failed, too. Now his true colors were fully exposed. He was a cold, you know how she is, Dad, ruthless man who believed money could buy anything, and that I was weak enough to be bought. But he was wrong. I thought about what he said about Marianne. You know how she is, Dad, and how I was clinging to the past. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was clinging. Maybe this house, these memories, and my worries' life were my way of holding on to something I had lost. But they were mine. My past, my memories, my home. And I was not going to let Connor Blake take them from me. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling in the dark. I knew Connor would try something else. Men like him always do. Men like him always do. You know how she is, Dad. When threats and manipulation fail, they look for a new angle, a new weapon. But for the first time since Marianne passed away, I remembered who I was. Theodore Marsh, engineer, builder, survivor. I built bridges designed to withstand immense pressure. I built a house that had weathered 36 years of storms. You know how she is, Dad. The life Marianne and I created was something Connor could never understand, and something he could never take away. I wasn't going to let him break me. The following Tuesday, there was a knock at my door. It was a firm, official knock, the kind that makes your stomach sink before you even turn the handle. I opened the door to find a woman standing on the porch. You know how she is, Dad. She held a clipboard, and a county badge was pinned to her jacket. She was in her early 40s, with dark hair, pulled back in a ponytail, her tired eyes holding the steady gaze of someone who had seen it all. "Mr. Theodore Marsh?" she asked. "Yes. My name is Lisa Hernandez. I'm an investigator with Deschutes County Adult Protective Services. We received a report regarding your welfare. I need to conduct an assessment to ensure you are safe and capable of caring for yourself." My stomach tightened. Connor. "Who filed the report?" I asked. "I'm not permitted to disclose that information," Lisa said. "May I come in?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to close the door and call Rachel, but I knew that would only make things worse. Refusing to cooperate would look suspicious, as if I had something to hide. "Of course," I said, stepping aside. Lisa walked into the living room and sat on the couch. She placed her clipboard on the coffee table and clicked her pen. "Mr. Marsh, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Just answer them as best as you can. You know, Hartz, there are no right or wrong answers. I just need to get an idea of your current situation." I sat in Marianne's armchair. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding. "What is today's date?" Lisa asked. "Tuesday, April 16th, 2024. "Who is the current President of the United States?" I answered her. She asked more questions. "Where do I live? How long have I lived here? What did I do for a living? Do I have any health issues? Am I taking any medications?" I answered every question clearly and accurately. You know how she is, Dad, just like I used to when presenting project reports to the State Commission. "Mr. Marsh, the report we received mentioned memory lapses and confusion. Have you experienced anything like that?" "No," I said firmly. "Never. Do you manage your own finances?" "Yes. I pay my bills on time, and I balance my checkbook every month. I've done so for 40 years. Do you cook for yourself?" "Yes." "Do you live here with your daughter and her husband?" "They live with me," I corrected her. "This is my house. I invited them to stay here 8 years ago when they were facing financial difficulties." Lisa took notes, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Marsh, do you mind if I look around? Just to get a sense of your living environment." "Go ahead." We walked through the house together. Lisa checked the kitchen first. The counters were clean, and the fridge was stocked with fresh food, milk, eggs, vegetables, with no burners left on and no signs of neglect. Was spotless, with no burners left on and no signs of neglect. We went to the bathroom. Clean, organized, with neatly folded towels. The medicine cabinet was tidy, and my blood pressure medication was arranged in order, with dates labeled on each bottle. Then my bedroom. The bed was made, my clothes were put away. Marianne's photo was on the drawer below. Marianne's photo was on the nightstand, and the lottery ticket was still hidden in the drawer below. Finally, we went to the workshop in the backyard. Lisa stepped inside and paused. Tools hung on the pegboard, each in its proper place. The workbench was clean, the sawdust swept away. On the shelves stood a row of small woodworking projects I had made over the years. Birdhouses, wooden boxes, and a small carved bowl. Lisa Lisa picked up one of the birdhouses, examining it closely. "This is beautiful how she is, Dad. This is beautiful craftsmanship. Do you still do woodworking?" "It keeps my hands busy," I said. She set it down gently. "Mr. Marsh, I've been doing this job for 12 years. I can tell the difference between someone who truly needs help and someone who is being targeted out of malice. You are absolutely not described in that report." A massive wave of relief washed over me. "So, you're closing the case?" "I still need to interview your neighbors and family members," Lisa said. "But based on what I've seen today, you know how she is, Dad. There is absolutely no indication that you are unable to care for yourself. Your home is clean, your mind is sharp, and you appear to be in excellent health." She stopped at the door and handed me her card. "If you ever do need help, real help, give me a call. Thank you." Lisa left. I closed the door and leaned against it, my hands finally starting to shake. I masked my true feelings during the interview, pushing through every question and passing every single test. But now, sitting alone in this quiet house, a wave of humiliation washed over me. I had to prove I was competent in my own home. You know how she is, Dad. I had to show a complete stranger that I could feed myself, that I wasn't confused, dangerous, or some useless burden. At 72 years old, I was being treated like a child who couldn't be trusted, and Connor was behind every bit of it. He filed that report. I knew it in my bones. You know how she is, Dad. He had called Adult Protective Services, claiming I was incompetent, unsafe, and a danger to myself. You know how she is, Dad. He was weaponizing the system, hoping they'd declare me unfit and appoint a guardian. Him. I walked into the kitchen and poured a glass of water, my hands still shaking. Lisa had mentioned she was going to interview Connor next, and I knew exactly what he'd say. He'd play the role of the calm, concerned, devoted son-in-law. He'd talk about my how she is, Dad. He'd talk about my memory lapses, my confusion, and make up stories about me forgetting to turn off the stove. He'd paint a picture of a fragile old man, and he would sound survive on his own, and he would sound, is this nightmare believable? A different kind of fear set in. A different kind of fear set in. It wasn't the fear of losing money or the house. It was, you know how she is, my autonomy. It was the fear of losing my independence, my autonomy, and my right to live my life on my own terms in my own home. That was what Connor really wanted to take from me. Not just my wealth, but my freedom. The next morning, Lisa interviewed Bernard and Maureen. The moment she left, Bernard called me. That absolute scoundrel actually tried to have you declared incompetent. Bernard's voice boomed with pure rage. Lisa just left. She asked us 100 questions about you, your memory, your habits, whether we've ever seen you confused or in an unsafe situation. Or, what did you tell her? I told her you're sharper than half the working engineers out there. And Maureen told her Connor Blake should be thoroughly ashamed of himself. We gave her the truth, Theo. You're fine, and this whole thing is absolute garbage. I closed my eyes. Thank you. She asked if we'd be willing to testify in court if it came to that. I told her, in a heartbeat. Bernard paused. You are not in this alone, Theo. You hear me? I hear you. How she is. That afternoon, there was another knock at my door. This time, it was Pastor Joyce Morgan. Joyce was 67, recently retired from the First Community Church. She had silver hair. You know how she is, Dad, a calm, grounding presence, and had comforted our congregation for 30 years. She was also a close friend of Bernard and Maureen. Theodore, she said, giving me a warm hug. Maureen called me. I wanted you to know that you have that backing of the church and this entire community. She walked in and sat at the kitchen table, pulling a thick folder from her bag. "I've known you for 16 years, Joyce said. Ever since known you for 16 years, Joyce said. Together. You're a devoted and husband, a loving father, and a wonderful neighbor. And a loving father. You know how she is. Dad, when Marianne passed, you carried that grief with dignity. She opened the folder and laid out 10 handwritten letters on the table. You know how she is, Dad. These are from the congregation of First Community. People who know you. People who are ready to stand up for you in court if needed." I stared at the letters, my throat tightening. I picked one up. It was from Tom and Susan Reed, who lived 2 streets over. I didn't even know them that well. They wrote about how they saw me at the hardware store every Saturday. Always polite, always sharp. You know how she is, Dad, and always offering advice to anyone who needed help with a project. Tears welled in my eyes. Why would they do this? Joyce reached across the table and squeezed my hand tightly. Because Marianne was loved, Theodore, and so are you. You know how she is, Dad. The following morning, Thursday, April 18th, Lisa called. "Mr. Marsh, I'm closing your case. I've concluded that the report is completely unsubstantiated. There is zero evidence of cognitive decline or self-neglect. You are fully capable of managing your own affairs." A massive wave of relief washed over me. "Thank you, Lisa. I interviewed your son-in-law yesterday," Lisa continued. "You know how she is, Dad. He made several claims about your memory and confusion. None of them held up. In fact, every single person I interviewed said the exact opposite. What happens now? I'm noting in my report that appears to be a malicious complaint tied to a financial dispute. If Mr. Blake attempts to file another report without legal justification, he could face serious legal consequences. You know how she is, Dad." I sat down, holding the phone to my ear, feeling a mixture of relief and anger. Connor had tried to strip away my freedom, and he had failed. "Thank you, Lisa. Take care of yourself, Mr. Marsh." That evening, Bernard and Maureen invited me over for dinner, but when I arrived, I found we weren't alone. Pastor Joyce Past was there, along with Jim and Carol Patterson, our neighbors from down the street whom I'd known for years. "We figured you could use some company," Maureen said, welcoming me inside. The table was set with Maureen's finest dinnerware. She had prepared pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, and homemade rolls, the kind of meal Marianne used to make on Sundays. You know how she is, sitting around that table. For the first time since my wife passed, I felt a familiar sensation. I felt seen. Bernard raised his glass. "To Theodore Marsh, a man who refuses to let some young punk steal his home." Everyone laughed, and we clinked our glasses. We ate, talking about everything and nothing. The weather, the Blazers, Joyce's new grandchild, and Jim's retirement plans. You know how she is, Dad. No one mentioned the lottery, Connor, or the investigation. They just let me be a regular man, a friend, and a neighbor. At one point, I looked around the table, my chest tightening with emotion. "When Marianne died," I said quietly, "I felt so incredibly lonely. When Claire and Connor moved in, I thought that would change. But I still felt lonely because they didn't really see me. They looked right through me." I paused, swallowing hard. "But you see me. You really see me." Maureen wiped her eyes. Bernard cleared his throat and said in a gruff voice, all right. Eat your pot roast." I stayed late, helping Maureen wash the dishes and listening to Bernard and Jim argue about baseball. When I finally walked home, the stars were out, bright and sharp in the high desert sky. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning, Friday, April 19th, I woke up to an email from Rachel. The mediation is set. Thursday, May 2nd, at 10 a.m., Oregon Lottery, Commission Headquarters, Salem. Be ready. You know how she is, Dad. This is where we make our read the email 3 times. Stad. Then I stood up, poured a cup of coffee, and looked out the window at the birch trees Marianne had planted 36 years ago. This was it. You know how she is, Dad, the moment that would decide everything. And I wasn't afraid. The week leading up to the mediation felt like the days before a trial. Rachel called me every single day. On Monday, April 22nd, she explained the process. It's not a courtroom, but it's formal. There will be a mediator, a neutral professional. Connor's lawyer will present his case first, then I'll present ours. They will ask you questions. Answer honestly, clearly, and keep it brief. Don't ramble and don't get emotional. Mr. Morton, Connor's lawyer, is going to try to make you look bad, frail, bitter, and greedy. Don't let him rattle you. I'll do my best. You're going to do great, Mr. Marsh. Just tell the truth. On Tuesday, we did a dry run. Rachel ran mock questions with me over the phone. Why did you give the ticket to Claire? Because she's my daughter. It was just a small gift. I never expected it to win. It only cost $2. Did you tell her it was a gift? I said, here, you can have this one. You know how she is, Dad. Did you expect her to give you the money back if she won? I paused. No, I never even thought about it. It was just a spontaneous gesture. Good. That's the truth. Stick to that. On Wednesday, we reviewed the documents. Rachel had compiled everything. Yid how she is, Dad. We had the receipt from the quick stop showing I bought 2 tickets in a single transaction, my bank statement confirming the debit card charge. You know how she is, the forged power of attorney with Connor's name on it, the police report, and the APS investigator's conclusion that the welfare report was a malicious, false allegation. Does Stanley Morton know about all this? I asked. He has no idea, Dad. He has no idea about the forgery or the APS investigation, Rachel said. I'd bet he's already questioning representing Connor, but he's locked in. He filed the claim, and now he has to see it through. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the dark, my mind racing. Claire was my daughter. If I won this mediation, she would lose $95 million. You know how she is, Dad, and she would walk away with nothing, and she would probably hate me, maybe forever. Was it worth it? I walked through the dark house. He laughed about it. You know how she is. Past the living room where Marianne and I used to watch old movies, past the kitchen where she'd hum while cooking, and down the hallway, stopping in front of a framed photo of the 3 of us. Me, Marianne, and Claire. Claire was 10, laughing on the beach. These walls, I built them. These walls, these floors, I laid them. This house was Marianne and me, our hands, our sweat, our dreams, and Connor was telling me I had to leave. You know how she is, Ed? I went back to my bedroom and sat on Marianne's side of the bed as I always did when I needed to think. This house is you, Mari, I whispered to the dark. It's you and me. How she is, Dad, and Connor is saying, I have to leave my own home. The one we built. I closed my eyes. I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing it for the principle, for the right to live in my own home, for my dignity. I imagined her voice, steady, kind, and resolute as always. Theodore, you have never backed down from what is right. Don't start now. Thursday, May 2nd. Morning. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, then got up and showered. I dressed carefully. A white button-down shirt, dark slacks, and the jacket I had worn to Marianne's funeral. It still fit perfectly. At 6 o'clock, there was a knock at the back door. I opened it to find Bernard holding a paper bag. "Maureen made waffles," he said, handing it over. "Figured you'd need something on your stomach." I took the bag. "Thank you." Bernard looked at me seriously. "Are you ready?" "No," I said. "But I'm going anyway." Bernard smiled. "That's what courage is, Theo. It's not about not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done, even when you are." I ate one of Maureen's waffles at the counter, grabbed my keys, my wallet, and the folder of documents since Rachel had prepared, and headed out to my truck. Bernard was still standing in his driveway. He raised a hand, and I waved back as I pulled onto Ponderosa Lane and headed west. The drive to Salem took 2.5 hours. Highway 26 wound through the Cascades, past forests, rivers, and logging towns. I kept the radio off. I needed the quiet. I thought of Marianne and the day in 1988 when we stood on that empty lot on Ponderosa Lane. It was just dirt and sagebrush back then, and she had said, "This is it, Theodore. This is where we build our life." I thought of Claire, holding her the day she was born, teaching her to ride a bike, and how she used to fall asleep on my shoulder when she was little-like. I thought of Connor, looking at me in the kitchen and calling me pathetic, and I thought of everything and manage built. Not just a house, but a life, a foundation. It's not just solid that was meant to hold up. Something solid that was meant to hold up. Marianne used to say, "If the foundation is strong, the structure holds." I had built a strong foundation. But Connor had spent 8 years chipping away at it. "You know how she is, Dad," and now we were about to find out if it would still hold. I arrived in Salem at 9:30 a.m. I parked in the lot across from the Oregon Lottery Commission building and sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. "You know how she is, Dad." Then I saw Rachel's car pull in. She parked next to me, got out, and walked over, tapping on my window. I rolled it down. "Ready?" she asked. "More than ever." She smiled. "Let's go get your house back." The Oregon Lottery Commission building on Liberty Street in downtown Salem was all glass and concrete. It didn't look like a place of justice at all. Rachel and I arrived at 9:45 a.m. "You know how she is, Dad." We parked across the street, walked through the main doors, and entered a lobby with polished floors and harsh fluorescent lights. Security checked our IDs, ran us through the metal detector, and pointed us toward the elevators. "7th floor," Rachel said softly. We rode up in silence, and my mind was sharp. My hands were steady, and my mind was sharp. "You know how she is, Dad." I had spent the last 2 weeks preparing for this, reviewing documents with practicing my answers, and going over the timeline again and again. I knew the facts. I knew the truth. The elevator doors opened to a small, sterile waiting area on the 7th floor, furnished with gray carpet, a few chairs, and a water cooler in the corner. Hasid Famin Greary carpet. "How she is, Dad." Sitting in those chairs on the far side of the room were Connor, Claire, and their lawyer. Connor was wearing a brand new suit, expensive, tailored, deep blue, with a crisp white shirt. Squart, he sat with his legs crossed, arm draped over the back of the adjacent chair, looking completely confident. Claire sat 2 chairs away from him. "You know how she is, Dad," her hands folded in her lap, staring down at her phone. "You know how she is, Dad." She looked pale and exhausted. Standing next to them was Stanley Morton, a 54-year-old with slicked-back gray hair and an expensive watch. His briefcase was open on a chair. "You know how she is, Dad," and he was busy reviewing his notes. When the elevator chimed, all 3 of them looked up. Connor didn't stand. He just stared at me, his expression unreadable, holding his pose. It was a power play, a provocation. Claire caught my eye for just a second before looking right back down at her phone. That split second hurt worse than anything Connor had done. You know how she is, Dad. Rachel's hand lightly touched my elbow. This way, Theo. We walked over to the other side of the waiting area and sat down. There were only 10 feet between us and Connor's team, but it felt like a vast canyon. At 9:55 a.m., the conference room door opened.
Hey,
A young woman wearing a lottery commission badge stepped out. We're ready for you. Connor was the first to stand, walking into the room as if he owned it. Claire followed quietly with her head down. Stanley Morton gave Rachel a professional nod, gathered his briefcase, and went inside. Rachel and I walked in last. You know how she is, Dad. The conference room was long and narrow, with a large table in the center and chairs on either side. Windows looked down at the street below, and a whiteboard hung on one wall. You know how she is, Dad. Bottles of water and a box of tissues sat in the middle of the table. Seated at the head of the table was a man in his late 60s with graying hair and bifocals, looking calm and composed. He stood as we entered. Good morning, he said. I'm Howard Phillips, the designated mediator for this case. Please take a seat. Connor, Claire, and Stanley sat on the right side of the table. You know how she is, Dad. Rachel and I sat on the left. We faced each other directly, with Howard sitting at the head of the table between us. I was highly aware of every movement. Know how she is, Dad. Claire sat 2 seats away from Connor, still refusing to look at me. Connor leaned back, fingers interlaced, watching everything closely. Howard adjusted his glasses and opened a manila folder. Let me explain the ground rules. Does you know how she is, Dad? This is an informal mediation to resolve a dispute over the ownership of Oregon Lottery. Ticket number 4718823C, purchased on April 3rd, 2024. My role is to facilitate discussion and help both parties reach a resolution. Hum was about it. I don't have the authority to make a binding ruling, but my findings will be reported to the commission, and they carry significant weight. You know how she is, Dad. Everything here is confidential unless both parties agree otherwise. He looked at each of us in turn. Does everyone understand? We all nodded. Excellent. Howard set his pen down and clasped his hands. Let's begin. Mr. Morton, your clients filed the claim. You may present your opening statement. Stanley Morton stood up, buttoned his suit jacket, cleared his throat, and looked directly at Howard. Thank you, Mr. Phillips. I represent Mr. Connor Blake and Ms. Claire Marsh in this matter. He gestured toward Connor and Claire. Claire didn't look up. You know how she is, Dad. The facts of this case are remarkably straightforward, Stanley continued. On April 3rd, Mr. Theodore Marsh purchased 2 Powerball tickets at a convenience store in Bend, Oregon. He brought one of those tickets home and gave it to his daughter Claire as a gift. Not a loan, not a conditional transfer, a gift. No strings attached, no expectation of return. Under Oregon law, that is the legal definition of a gift. Stanley paused to let his words sink in. 3 days later, that ticket won $95 million. Ms. Marsh checked the numbers, confirmed the win, and notified her family. At no point during those 3 days did Mr. Marsh show any interest in the ticket he had given away, not until he learned of its value. Stanley's voice was smooth and confident. Oregon law recognizes informal gifts of personal property. A lottery ticket is personal property. The moment Mr. Marsh handed that ticket to his daughter and said, "Here, you can have this one," ownership was transferred. He may regret his generosity now, wishing know how she is, Dad. He had kept the ticket, but that does not undo the gift. He looked at Howard. You know how she is, Dad. We ask that the Commission recognize Claire Marsh as the sole legal owner of the ticket and allow her to claim the prize." Stanley sat down, and Connor nodded in satisfaction. Claire remained focused on the table, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Howard made a note on his pad. Then he looked across the table at Rachel. "Miss Kemp, your opening statement." Rachel stood up. I knew this was the moment that would decide everything. I had rehearsed this story with her countless times, but sitting across from Claire now, all those rehearsed words vanished. All I could do was tell the truth. Rachel stood up, her composure steady yet commanding. "Mr. Morton has presented some of the facts," she began. "You know how she is, Dad, but what he omitted are the things that matter most. You know how she is, Dad." She reached into her briefcase and laid 2 documents on the table in front of Howard Phillips. "This," Rachel said, tapping the first page, "is the receipt from the quick stop off Highway 97 in Bend, Oregon. Dated April 3rd, 2024 at 2:17 p.m. 2 Powerball tickets. You know how she is, Dad. Paid for with a debit card belonging to Theodore Marsh." She pushed the second document forward. "And this is Mr. You know how she is, Dad. Marsh's bank statement showing a matching charge of $4 to the quick stop at that exact date and time." Howard leaned forward. "You know how she is, Dad," peering closely at both pages through his bifocals. Rachel continued, her voice level and resonant. "Mr. Marsh bought 2 tickets. He paid for both. Under Oregon law, he is the legal owner of both." Stanley Morton shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Connor's jaw clenched. "Mr. Marsh did informally give his daughter a ticket," Rachel added, "a slip of paper worth $2. At the time, you know how she is, Dad, it had no more value than a greeting card. But a ticket worth $95 million is not a casual gift. It is a massive financial asset, and Oregon lottery regulations require clear documentation in cases of ownership disputes. Mr. Marsh has documentation. Mr. Blake does not." Howard looked over at me. "Mr. Marsh, can you confirm that you purchased these tickets on April 3rd? "Yes, sir," I said, my voice softer than I wanted but steady. "And you bought both in a single transaction?" "Yes. 2 tickets, $4 total." "Why did you buy 2? I caught Rachel's eye. She gave me a tiny nod. "Because my friend Bernard dared me to buy 1, I said, "and I figured if I was going to buy 1, I might as well buy 2. It was only $4. I never thought either of them would win. I just did it." Howard made a note on his pad. "And you gave 1 to your daughter?" "Yes." "Why?" I looked at Claire. She was staring down at the table. Her hands clenched so tightly in her lap, her knuckles were white. "Because she's my daughter," I said. "It was a tiny thing, a $2 ticket. I wanted to share it with her." Howard's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Marsh, why did you file a dispute claim with the Commission?" I took a deep breath. Because 3 days after my daughter's ticket won, her husband told me I had to pack up and leave. He told me that the house I built with my own hands 36 years ago, with my late wife, was no longer my home. He said the $95 million wasn't mine, and Stanley leaned forward. "Mr. Marsh, you are 72 years old. You are 72 years old. How clearly do you remember the events of April 3rd? Rachel's hand brushed my arm, a silent signal to remain calm. "I remember it perfectly," I said. "I know how she is, Dad. I rode to the quick stop with Bernard Sullivan. Dave Wilson, the owner, sold me the tickets. I paid with my debit card. I have the receipt. I remember everything." Stanley leaned back, his expression darkening. Rachel reached into her briefcase once more, pulling out a thicker envelope this time. "There is one more thing," she said, her tone suddenly razor-sharp. On April 8th, Mr. Blake submitted a power of attorney document to Columbia Bank, claiming control over Mr. Marsh's accounts. She placed a letter on the table. You know how she is, Dad. This is correspondence from the bank dated April 24th. The bank, how she is, Dad. The bank rejected the document because the signature did not match Mr. Marsh's signature card. They flagged it as potential fraud. Howard's eyebrows shot up. He reached for the letter. Rachel wasn't finished. She placed a second document right next to the first. You know how she is, Dad, and this is the police report filed by Mr. Marsh with the Bend Police Department on April 9th. Case number 2024 BR 04751. You know how she is, Dad. The report documents an attempt to commit financial fraud through forgery. A dead silence fell over the room. Howard looked directly at Connor. Mr. Blake, do you have a response to this? Connor's face turned paper white. That was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Rachel cut in, showing no mercy. You know how she is, Dad. You forged a legal document in my client's name to seize control of his bank accounts. That is not a misunderstanding. It is fraud. And it establishes a pattern of behavior, an attempt to steal my client's assets using manipulation, coercion, and forgery. Howard took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Mr. Morton, were you aware of this? Stanley Morton looked genuinely shocked. No, I had absolutely no knowledge of this. No, I had absolutely no knowledge of this. Howard put his glasses back on and fixed Connor with a long, hard stare. Mr. Blake, forging a power of attorney is a felony in the state of Oregon. If this matter goes any further beyond today, you will face criminal charges. Connor opened his mouth to speak, but Stanley grabbed his arm, silencing him. We need a moment, Stanley said quickly. Without waiting, he practically dragged Connor out of the room. The door clicked shut behind them. I sat there, hands on the table, my heart hammering. Across from me, Claire finally looked up. Her eyes were red. She wasn't looking at me, though. She was staring at the bank letter, the police report, and the physical proof of what her husband had done. The physical proof. You know how she is, Dad. For the first time in 8 years, I saw my daughter cry. When we returned from the recess, Claire was still sitting there, clutching a crumpled tissue. It was 12:45 p.m. Her eyes were red and swollen. Connor sat next to her, his jaw set and arms crossed. Stanley Morton was nowhere to be seen, likely outside making a phone call. Howard Phillips cleared his throat. Messrs. Marsh, he said gently, I'd like to hear from you. What happened when your father gave you the ticket? Claire's voice was barely a whisper. I don't know what to say. Howard kept his tone soft. Take your time, do you remember? Yes. Did he say anything? Claire swallowed hard. Dad said he bought a lottery ticket, and that it was silly. He was smiling. It was the first time I'd seen him smile in months. I felt a sharp pinch in my chest. Howard nodded. Did he say the jackpot would be yours? No, Claire said quietly. He just handed it to me and said, Here, you can have this one, I said. Thanks, Dad. That was it. Howard made a note. And what happened when the ticket won? Claire's voice cracked. Connor checked the numbers. He got so excited. He said we were rich. He started making phone calls right away. And your father? Dad just stood there, Claire whispered. He looked lost. Connor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Howard gave him a sharp glare, then turned back to Claire. Mrs. Marsh, answer me directly. Honestly. Don't look at anyone else. You know how she is, Dad. During these 8 years, has your father ever mistreated you? Has he ever made you feel unwelcome? Has he ever tried to hurt or manipulate you? A long silence stretched. Then Claire's tears spilled over again. No. Howard leaned forward. No? Claire shook her head. Dad, never. He's been nothing but kind. Connor opened his mouth. Claire. But Claire's voice suddenly cut through, louder than I had heard her speak in years. Dad never said he didn't want us here. He never complained. Not once. She turned to Howard, her words coming faster and faster. It was Connor who told me Dad hated having us. Connor said, Dad only kept us out of obligation. Connor said he was talking behind our backs to the neighbors. Her voice broke. But Dad never said those things. Connor told me he did, and I believed him. I believed Connor over my own father. Connor's face drained of color. That's not. Claire spun on him. You told me Dad wanted us gone. You told me he was too polite to say it. You said you were trying to protect me. Protect me from what? Claire sobbed. From my father, who loved me? From the man who took us in when we had absolutely nothing? The air in the room felt electric. I wiped a tear from my eye, staring at my daughter in disbelief. Claire turned back to Howard, her voice trembling. My father never wanted us to leave. Connor did. Connor wanted to throw him out, and I let him do it. Connor bolted upright. This is ridiculous. Claire, we're leaving. Mr. Blake, Howard said sharply. Sit down. We don't have to. I'm not going with you. I'm not going with you, Claire said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm level. Connor froze. What? I'm not going with you. Not anymore. Connor's face flushed deep red. Claire, think about what you're saying. I've been thinking about it for weeks. I'm done. Just then, the door opened and Stanley Morton walked back in. He looked around the room, taking in Claire's tear-stained face, Connor's fury, and Howard's severe expression. He set his briefcase on the table. Mr. Phillips, I am withdrawing from this case, effective immediately. Immediately. Connor's head snapped toward him. You can't do that. I can and I am, Stanley said coldly. In light of the evidence of fraud and the testimony just given, I cannot ethically continue to represent you. He turned to Howard. My apologies for the disruption. Supplut's umbefad, Dad. He picked up his briefcase, looked at Connor, and said, Good luck, Mr. Blake. You're going to need it. He walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. Complete silence. Howard looked at Connor. Mr. Blake, do you wish to proceed without counsel? Connor stood there, breathing heavily, radiating pure venom. This is all garbage. The old man is manipulating. Sit down. Howard's voice was like steel. Connor looked at Claire. Claire, we're leaving. Now. Claire didn't move. Claire, she said quietly. No. Connor glared at her, his face twisted in rage. You know how she is, Dad. Then he spun toward me, his eyes filled with poison. This isn't over, he spat, storming out and slamming the door behind him. The room grew quiet again. Howard exhaled slowly. Are you all right, Ms. Marsh? Claire shook her head. No, but I will be. Howard looked at me, then at Rachel. We are concluded here for today. You know how she is, Dad. I will issue my findings within 5 business days. But I think we all know where this is headed. He turned to me. Mr. Marsh, based on the evidence presented, the receipt of purchase, meritus, peace, lack of any transfer documentation, the evidence of fraud and conspiracy, and Ms. Marsh's testimony, I will be recommending to the Commission that you be recognized as the sole legal owner of the disputed ticket. I let out a long breath I didn't even realize I was holding. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. We are adjourned, Howard said, standing up. The room began to empty. Howard gathered his files and left. Rachel walked out to make a phone call, and then there were just the two of us. Claire and I sat across from each other. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Claire stood up. "You know how she is, Dad?" She walked slowly around the table, her hands trembling. She stopped in front of me and said, "Dad, I'm so sorry. We stood in that conference room together. You know how she is, Dad." It felt like an hour had passed, though it was probably only 3 short minutes. She cried. I cried. She kept saying she was sorry. I told her I knew. Rachel tapped lightly on the door. "We need to go." Claire drove her car, and I drove mine. I didn't know if I'd ever see her again. At 2 p.m., I left Salem and headed east on Highway 22 toward home, a 3-hour drive. The afternoon sun was blindingly bright. "You know how she is, Dad?" I kept picturing Claire's face, Connor's fury, and Howard's words. I kept the radio off. I needed the quiet. Halfway there, my phone rang through the truck's Bluetooth. "Theodore, how did it go?" Bernard asked. I swallowed hard. I think I won." "And Claire?" My voice caught. She apologized. She broke down. She told the truth. There was a pause on the line. Then Bernard said softly, "Good job, Theo's." I got home at 5 p.m. Connor's truck was in the driveway. Claire's car was parked next to it. I sat in my truck for a moment to steady myself, then walked inside. Connor was in the upstairs bedroom. "You know how she is, Dad?" I could hear him pacing around, the door closed. Claire was in the kitchen. She stood by the sink, her back to me. I stopped in the doorway. "Claire." She froze, her shoulders tensing. "You know how she is, Dad?" "I can't do this right now," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not yet. I'm sorry." She walked past me with her head down and went upstairs. I stood alone in the kitchen. "You know how she is, Dad?" listening to the footsteps above. "You know how she is, Dad?" Then I heard the voices. Connor's sharp, angry shouting and Claire's quieter voice, which eventually turned into sobbing. I thought about going up. "You know how she is, Dad?" I thought about knocking on the door and demanding to speak to my daughter. But I didn't. That wasn't my place anymore. The next morning, Friday, "You know how she is?" Connor left the house at 8 a.m. and didn't return until after 10 p.m. I figured he went to see a new lawyer or plan his next move. I didn't ask. That afternoon, I was in my workshop sanding the legs of a small table I was building when I saw a piece of paper slip under the door. I put down my sandpaper and picked it up. The paper was folded once. It was Claire's handwriting. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to face Yao. I don't know how to make up for what I've done. I'm scared, but I need you to know that I love you. I always have." Claire, I sat on my workbench, holding that note, and wept. Saturdays and Sunday dragged by. The house felt like a minefield. Connor avoided me entirely. Once, we crossed paths in the hallway. "You know how she is, Dad," and he glared at me with pure trit, but didn't say a word. I saw Claire twice. The first time was in the upstairs hallway. She stopped when she saw me, and we just looked at each other for a long moment. Then she whispered, "Hi, Dad," and hurried past. The second time, I looked out the window and saw her sitting in her car in the driveway. I wanted to go to her. I wanted to help. But I didn't know how. "You know how she is." Bernard stopped by Saturday afternoon with a loaf of banana bread Maureen had baked. "How are you holding up?" he asked. I shrugged. I lived with them for 8 years, and now I don't even know how to speak to them. Bernard nodded. "Connor is done for. But Claire, give her some time, Theo." On Sunday, "You know how she is, Dad?" I did something I hadn't done since Marianne's funeral. I went to church. First Hunt Community Church was exactly as I remembered it. The same pews, the same stained glass windows, the smell of old hymnals and wood polish. As I was leaving after the service, Pastor Joyce saw me. She walked over with a warm smile. "I heard the mediation went well," she said. I think so, I replied. We'll know for sure this week. And Claire? I looked down. She's struggling. He'd laughed about it. You know how she is, Dad? Joyce placed a hand on my arm. She'll get through it. She knows the truth now. That's the hardest part. I went home and spent the rest of the day in my workshop, carving a small wooden cross. I didn't know who it was for. Maybe Marianne, maybe myself. Monday morning, I was awake at 5 a.m. I hadn't slept much. I made coffee, you know how she is, Dad, ate some toast, and sat at the kitchen table waiting. The phone didn't ring. Tuesday and Wednesday came and went with no news. Then, Thursday morning, May 9th. I woke up at 5 a.m. again, showered, dressed, made more coffee, and stared at the phone. At 10:15 a.m., it finally rang. It was Rachel. I picked up on the second ring. Hello? Theo. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the smile in it. We won. I sank heavily into a kitchen chair. Rachel. Howard issued his findings this morning. The commission accepted his recommendation. The ruling is in your favor. Connor's claim has been dismissed, and you are recognized as the sole legal owner of both tickets. I couldn't speak. Both tickets, I finally managed. Both of them. No transfer documents, no contracts, no signed agreements, nothing. Theo, you are getting $95 million. I sat there, completely numb, staring at the wall. $95 million. 2 tickets. I had won. Rachel explained. He'd laughed about it. How she is, Dad? You can submit the winning ticket and begin the official claim process now. After an 11-day verification period, you'll receive the money. You know how she is, Dad. It will be $47.5 million after taxes. I held the phone to my ear, trying to comprehend that astronomical number. Rachel continued, You'll also need to send a formal eviction notice. 60 days? I repeated. I'll draft it today. You can hand it to them whenever you're ready. That afternoon, Rachel emailed the notices. I printed 2 copies, one for Connor and one for Claire, and laid them on my desk. I stared at them for an hour. Bernard called. Did you give them the notices yet? Not yet. What are you waiting for? I don't know. Finally, on Tuesday, May 14th, I made my move. I couldn't face them directly. I just couldn't. So, I left the 2 notices on the kitchen table, their names written on the envelopes, and drove over to Bernard's place. When I returned 2 hours later, Connor's truck was gone, the notices were gone, and there was a gaping hole in the living room wall. Connor had punched it. You know how she, Dad? Marianne's framed photo, the one that used to sit on the mantel, had been knocked to the floor. The glass was shattered. I picked it up with trembling hands. Bernard was right to tell me to keep my distance. Upstairs, the bedroom door was closed. I knocked gently. Claire. Her voice was quiet. Come in, Dad. I opened the door. Claire was sitting on the bed next to an open suitcase, her clothes neatly folded inside. He's gone, she said. He said he's staying at a motel. He said a lot of other things I don't want to repeat. Are you okay? No, but I'm not hurt. She looked at me. 60 days, under Oregon law. I'm so sorry, Claire. She shook her head. Don't apologize. You have every right. She paused. I'll be out in 2 weeks. Connor need a few days to figure out where I'm going. I just need a few days to figure out where I'm going. You know how she is, Dad. You can stay the full 60 days if you need to, I said. Claire shook her head. I can't stay here anymore. Not after what I did. I wanted to say so many things, but I couldn't find the right words. All right, I said. The next day, Wednesday the 15th, Rachel and I drove down to Salem. You know how she is, Dad. The Oregon Lottery Commission's office was on the 3rd floor of a gray government building. The process was incredibly formal, starting with verifying my identity, submitting the ticket, and filling out paperwork in triplicate. The clerk, a middle-aged woman wearing reading glasses, looked up. "Congratulations, Mr. Mild." Congratulations, Mr. Marsh. Your claim will be processed over the next 11 business days and, well, contact you for the final payout, though. She handed me a receipt with an official claim code, $95 million. After taxes, it came out to $47.5 million. It was life-changing money, but it didn't feel real. In the parking lot, Rachel asked me, "How are you feeling?" "Empty?" I said. "That feeling will pass. Give yourself some time." She paused. "I want to introduce you to Caroline Pfizer, a financial advisor I trust. You're going to I trust. You're going to need help with accounts, investments, and estate planning." I felt, "Step at a time," I replied. On the drive back home, I imagined what Marianne would say. On the drive back home, I imagined what Marianne would say. "Don't let money change who you are." "I won't, Mari," I whispered. "I promise." The next morning, Thursday the 16th, a moving truck pulled into the driveway at 10 o'clock. Connor had hired them. I stayed out in my workshop and watched through the window. Connor was bossing the movers around with a terrible attitude, shouting and gesturing angrily. They loaded up the furniture, boxes, the TV, the sofa, and the kitchen table. By afternoon, the truck was fully loaded. Connor walked up to the workshop door. He didn't bother to knock. He just stood on the other side of the glass and said, "You think you won, but you didn't. You lost your daughter. You know how she is, Dad. You're going to end up alone in this house with all your money. That's exactly how you'll finish." Then he turned and walked away. The truck pulled out of the driveway. "You know how she is, Dad," with Connor's car following right behind. They were gone. Standing by the workshop door, I felt the house grow quiet. A strange sense of relief washed over me. Over the next few days, Claire stayed behind. "You know how she is, Dad." Slowly packing her things. We crossed paths in the hallway, exchanging awkward mornings and stiff goodnights. There wasn't much conversation, but we remained polite. You know hantabout. On the third evening after Connor left, I was making dinner. Just spaghetti, nothing special. Claire walked downstairs. "Smells good, Dad." "There's plenty," I said, "if you'd like some." She hesitated. "Yes, thank you." We ate at the kitchen table. It was quiet, but it wasn't hostile. "Dad." "Yeah, I'm filing for divorce. I called a lawyer today." "Good." She looked down at her plate. "I'm going to rent my own apartment, start over, maybe find a job. I haven't worked in 8 years." "You'll manage," I said. "You're strong." "I don't feel strong." "Being strong isn't a feeling," I told her. "It's a choice." Claire smiled faintly. "You sound just like Grandpa. He used to say that. He was a wise man." 3 days later, I went to the hardware store to buy some sandpaper. When I got back home, Claire's car was gone. Her bedroom was empty, completely cleaned out. The bed was made, and she had even vacuumed the carpet. On the kitchen counter, there was an envelope with my name on it. It was a handwritten hands. I opened it. It was handwritten letter from Claire, spanning 2 pages in her elegant cursive. It began with "Dear Dad" and ended with "I love you." Serene between those lines, she wrote down all the things she couldn't bring herself to say to my face. I sat at the kitchen table and began to read. The ink was smudged in a few places. "You know how she is, Dad," showing she had been crying while writing it. "Dear Dad, I'm writing this because I don't have the courage to say these words to your face. I am so sorry. You know how she is, Dad. Those 3 words will never be enough, but they are all I have. I want to apologize, Dad. 8 years. I want to apologize. Yeah, the last 8 didn't matter. I'm sorry for letting Connor treat you like you didn't matter. When he demanded that you leave your own home, the house you built with your own hands, the house where Mom lived, I chose to stay silent. I'm sorry for believing his lies instead of the truth in my own heart. For 8 years, Connor kept telling me that you hated having us here, that you were just polite that you were just too polite to say it, but that you wanted us gone. He said you were talking behind our backs to the neighbors. He told me you were becoming bitter, forgetful, and difficult to live with, and I actually believed him. I feel so deeply ashamed. You know how she is, Dad. The truth is, believing Connor was much easier than facing my own guilt. I knew we were taking advantage of you. I knew Connor was using you. If I admitted that, I would have had to do something about it. But I was too weak, too scared, and too dependent on him. I lost myself in this marriage, Dad. I lost myself in this marriage, Dad. I turned into someone I didn't even recognize, someone capable of betraying her own father for a man who never truly loved her. You know how she is, Dad. Now I see that Connor didn't marry me because he loved me. He saw an opportunity, a house he could claim, and, eventually, money he could control. I don't expect your forgiveness. You know how she is, Dad. I don't expect you to want me in your life anymore. But I need you to know that I love you. I never stopped loving you. And even when I couldn't show it, and even when I chose him over you, I'm finalizing the divorce. I've rented my own apartment. You know how she is, Dad. I'm going to figure out who I am outside of this mess. If you don't want to see me, I completely understand. But if there is any chance, I will come back in 3 days. I will knock on the door, and if you don't open it, I will understand. I love you, Dad. I am so incredibly sorry. Love, Claire. After reading the letter, I laid it on the table and buried my face in my hands. I cried for the 8 years we had lost. You know how she is, Dad? I cried for Claire's pain, and I cried because Mary Ann wasn't here to help us through this. But at the same time, I cried out of hope. She said she would come back in 3 days. I spent those 3 days cleaning. I vacuumed the living room rug, dusted Mary Ann's photo. The broken glass was now repaired, scrubbed the kitchen until it shone, and even tidied up the guest room, though I wasn't entirely sure why. Bernard dropped by on the second day. He found me furiously wiping down the countertops. You know how she is, Dad. You're about to rub a hole right through that granite, he said. I handed him the letter. You know how she is, Dad. He read it slowly, folded it up carefully, and handed it back to me. She's coming home, Theo. This isn't her home anymore. Home isn't a place, Bernard said. Home is people. By the third day, I was an absolute wreck. I woke up at 5 and couldn't fall back asleep. I made coffee, paced around the house, and kept checking the driveway. By noon, I was convinced she wasn't coming. Then, at 4 in the afternoon, a car pulled in. It was Claire's. My heart hammered against my chest. I froze in place, listening to her footsteps come up the porch. A soft knock on the door. I forced myself to move. I walked to the door, took a deep breath, and opened it. Claire stood there in jeans and a sweater, her eyes red and swollen. She had been crying on the drive over. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. "Hi, sweetheart." We stood there, neither of us knowing what to do. "Come on in," I said. She sat on the sofa, and I sat in my armchair. For a long time, neither of us spoke. "Did you read it?" she asked. 3 times. I read every single word. I know. Another silence stretched between us. I leaned forward. "Claire, you know how she is, Dad. I need you to understand something." "You know how she is, Dad." She looked at me, her eyes a mix of fear and hope. "I forgive you," I said. She let out a shaky breath. I mean it, I continued. But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. I can't just forget the last 8 years. We need to start over. Not as a father and daughter living under the same roof, but as two people who love each other and are trying to learn how to trust each other again. Tears welled up in her eyes. I want that. It won't be easy. I know it's going to take time and absolute honesty. I'm willing to do the work, Dad. I promise. I looked at her face. I saw so much of Marianne in her, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile. But I also saw a person who had lost her way and was trying her hardest to find her way back. Then I'm willing to try too. Claire broke down. She covered her face, letting out deep, shuddering sobs. I crossed the room and sat down beside her. She leaned into me, burying her face in my shoulder. I wrapped my arms around her. For the first time in 8 years, I held my daughter. She cried, and I cried with her. We sat like that for a long time. Eventually, Claire pulled back and wiped her eyes. I'm an absolute mess. You have every right to be a mess. She let out a short, watery laugh. Can we try something? What's that? Sunday dinners, just like Mom used to do. That hit me hard. You know how she is, Dad. Marianne's Sunday dinners. Pot roast and mashed potatoes. The four of us sitting around the table back when everything was good. I'd love that, I said. Claire nodded. And I want to pay you back for rent, utilities, everything. I need to take responsibility. I wanted to protest, but I understood. This was part of her healing. All right, you know how she is, Dad. We'll set up a repayment plan that you can afford. Thank you. We talked for another hour. She told me about her new apartment, a small one-bedroom downtown. She was looking for a job. You know how she is, Dad. Putting her resume together after an 8-year gap. The divorce proceedings were moving forward despite Connor's objections. She had also started going to therapy twice a week. You know how she is, Dad. I have a lot of things to work through, she said. That takes courage. I don't feel brave. Courage isn't a feeling, I told her. It's a choice, she smiled, a genuine one. You sound like Grandpa. He was a wise man. Finally, she glanced at the clock. I should go. I walked her to the door. Dad, yeah. I love you. I love you too, little Claire Bear. She paused. You haven't called me that since I was a little girl. You'll always be my little Claire Bear. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she was smiling. She gave me a tight hug. Thank you. Then she left. I stood on the porch, watching her taillights disappear into the night. When I walked back inside, I leaned against the door. For the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe. Later that evening, I sat on the back porch and watched the sunset. Shades of orange, pink and purple, chic and purple, stretched across the sky over the mountains. I thought about everything. The lottery, the betrayal, the fight, the victory. You know how she is, Dad, and now this restart of something I thought was gone forever. I'm proud of you, Theodore, Marianne's voice seemed to whisper in my mind. I hope so, Mari, I murmured. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Claire. Thank you for giving me a second chance. See you Sunday. I love you. I smiled and replied, I love you too. Sunday at 5. I'll make the pot roast. Perfect. That night, I slept in my own bed, in my own house. Claire's letter sat on my nightstand. Sunday dinner was officially on the calendar. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was pouring through Marianne's curtains, the ones she had sewn herself 30 years ago. Lying there, watching the light, I realized something. I didn't just win the lottery. I got my life back. The money cleared on Tuesday, June 18th, $47,500,000. I stared at the number on my screen for 20 minutes, then called Bernard. It's real, I said. What are you going to do with it? Whatever I want. I fought for this. The next day, I went to see Caroline Pfizer, the financial advisor Rachel had recommended. Her office downtown was quiet, with leather armchairs and a beautiful mountain view. Caroline was 56, with graying hair and a direct way of speaking. Theo, what do you want your money to do for you? I want security. I want to help my daughter. And I want to honor my wife. We spent 2 hours making a plan. Caroline suggested a diversified portfolio: index funds, bonds, real estate, trusts, and savings. How she is, Dad. This will generate about $1.5 million a year in passive income while keeping your principal untouched, Caroline said. Every single year. You know how she is, Dad. You can live incredibly comfortably and fund charitable causes. Suddenly, an idea sparked in my mind. He'd laughed about it. What if I wanted to help elderly people whose families try to take advantage of them? People who are being pushed out of their own homes? People who need a lawyer but can't afford one, Caroline smiled. A legal protection fund. Put $20 million into it and you can make it run permanently. I thought of Mary Ann, who always stood up for those who couldn't speak for themselves. I want to do that, I called Rachel. I want to establish the Marsh Elder Protection Fund. $20 million dedicated to helping elderly victims of financial abuse. I want you to run it as the legal director, and I want Lisa Hernandez to serve as an advisor. Rachel's voice cracked with emotion. Theo, that is incredible. In July, we officially launched the fund. Rachel opened an office in Portland, and Lisa started working with us 3 days a week. By September, we took on our first case, an 82-year-old woman whose son had forged a power of attorney to take her house. Rachel won the case in 6 weeks. The woman called me, crying, "You saved my life." "No, ma'am," I told her. "You saved your own. We just gave you the tools." By the end of the year, the fund had helped 47 people. You know how she is, Dad. Mary Ann would have loved it. You know how she is, but I still needed one more thing. In August, I put the house on Ponderosa Lane up for sale. Bernard came over when he saw the sign. "Are you sure about this? I built this place with Mary Ann. Every board, every nail. But Connor and Claire left a stain here that I just can't wash away. I need a fresh start." "Where are you going?" "The coast, Cannon Beach, the ocean air, the endless horizon. A place where I can breathe." The house sold in 3 weeks to a young family with 2 small children. I packed light. Mary Ann's photos, my tools, and a few pieces of furniture. By late August, I bought a home in Cannon Beach, a modern glass and timber structure overlooking the Pacific. You know how she is, Dad. It had a workshop with large windows where I could hear the waves crashing. It wasn't the house Mary Ann and I built with our own hands, but it was mine. On my first morning there, I walked down to the beach as the sun rose over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The air smelled of salt and freedom. Bernard and Maureen visit often. We walk along the beach and drink coffee on the deck. "You look lighter," Maureen said to me one day. She was right. It felt as if a weight I had carried for 8 years had finally been lifted. Claire drives over every other Sunday. It's a three-hour drive from Bend, but she never misses it. You know how she is, Dad. We cook dinner, the same pot roast Mary Ann used to make, and sit on the deck watching the sunset. In September, her divorce was finalized. "How do you feel?" I asked her. "Free, scared, but free." In October, she got a job at a community center in Bend, earning $15 an hour. "It's not much," she said, "but I earned it. I haven't earned anything on my own in 8 years. I'm proud of you. Really? Really." In December, I helped her move into her new apartment. It's small, clean, and entirely her own. It's perfect. It's not much, she said. It's perfect. Christmas was quiet. Just the two of us at the beach house. Claire brought cookies that were a little burnt, and I made the roast. We exchanged gifts. I gave her an old photo album Marianne had put together, and Claire gave me a framed picture of Marianne and me from the 90s. I found it in storage. I thought you should have it, she said. I cried. You know how she is, Dad. We had Christmas together, just the two of us, and that was more than enough. Spring arrived in April of 2025, a full year after the mediation. One morning, you know how she is, Dad. I was out in the garden planting daffodils, Marianne's favorite flower. I'm 73 now, but still strong. A car pulled up, and Claire stepped out wearing gardening gloves. Morning, Dad. Thought you might need some help. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. We knelt side by side, planting bulbs in a garden that looked a lot like the one Marianne used to keep. Dad. Yeah. Thank you for not giving up on me. I thank you for not giving up on you, Connor did. I would never give up on you. Bud, I am not Connor. No, you aren't. We finished up and stood to brush the dirt off our knees. When will they bloom? Late spring? Probably. Mom would love it here. She would. We sat on the steps of the deck, the morning sun warming the ocean, stretching out before us. I looked around at the house I bought, the daughter sitting next to me, the garden I was planting, and the life I had fought to reclaim. I used to think a house was just walls and a roof, I said. Wooden nails, things you could measure. Claire listened quietly. But it isn't. A house she is, Dad. But it isn't. A house is memories. It's the people who fill it, your mother-mom's laughter, your first steps, the arguments, the forgiveness, the love. Is that why you fought so hard? I fought because letting Connor take it would mean admitting none. None of it mattered. That 36 years with your mother could be erased by greed. How she is, Dad. I wasn't fighting for the money. I was fighting for the meaning. Claire. Claire rested her head on my shoulder. You won, Dad. We both did. I sat there as the Pacific Ocean stretched out to the horizon. The lottery, the betrayal, the fight, the victory, and the fund currently helping 47 people. Claire was free and healing. Marianne's memory in Notley was respected. But I was happy. Not perfectly, and not without scars, but truly happy for the first time since Marianne passed away. People's family is everything, and I believe that. I believe that. But family isn't just the people you share a roof or a bloodline with. Family is the people who see you, the people who stand by you, and the people who tell you the truth, even when it hurts. And you know how she is, Dad. Connor and Claire lived in my house for 8 years, but when it mattered, Bernard, Maureen, Pastor Joyce, and Rachel were my family. And Claire, she finally found her way home. You know how she is, Dad. If you are facing betrayal, loss, and fear, remember this. You have the right to protect what is yours. Your home, your dignity, your peace. You know how she is, Dad. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them take everything from you. Fight for what truly matters, and fight with honor. And when the dust settles, leave a door open for forgiveness, not because they deserve it. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. I'm 73 years old, with more money than I could ever spend. But my greatest wealth is Sunday dinners with my daughter, working in the garden, and knowing I stood up when it counted. You know how she is, Dad. That is worth more than $95 million. It's worth everything. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Leave a comment and let me know your story. Thank you for listening. I'm Theodore Marsh from Cannon Beach, Oregon. Take care of each other. You know how she is, Dad. Looking back on this journey, I see a man who almost lost everything. Not out of weakness, but because he loved too deeply and trusted too blindly. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't make the same I did. Don't ignore the warning signs, and don't let years pass by while someone slowly takes away your home, your dignity, and your peace. Establish boundaries early. Love does not mean letting others walk over you. Standing up for yourself isn't about cruelty. It's about holding on to what is right when everyone expects you to fold. I didn't fight for the money. You know how she is, Dad, but for the meaning behind it all, for Marianne's memory, for the home we built, and for my own soul. This story taught me that betrayal hurts the most when it comes from those you love. But it also taught me that redemption is possible. You know how she is, Dad. Claire found her way back, and I found my peace. What started as a stand for justice turned into forgiveness and healing. I truly believe that our trials are not meant to break us, but to reveal who we really are. We are. When Connor tried to take my home, I discovered I was stronger than I ever imagined. And when Claire came back, I was reminded of how powerful forgiveness can be. You define how she is, Dad. If you find yourself in a difficult situation, facing manipulation, greed, or betrayal, remember that you are not alone. Fight with honor, protect what is yours, and when things settle, leave a door open for those who genuinely want to make amends. Finding peace is the ultimate goal. Thank you for walking this path with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my position? Share your mind in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Just a gentle reminder, while inspired by very real social dynamics surrounding financial elder abuse, elements of this story have been the narrative experience and dramas of this store, the important inspired life experience, and to share these important life lessons. You know how she is, Dad. If this style of content isn't for you, feel free to explore other videos on the channel. I'm Theodore Marsh from Cannon Beach, Oregon. Take care of each other.